here to tell you a little bit about the social innovation practice area at the Wond'ry. And we also have two people who are community and faculty partners with some of our programs here to talk about their experience collaborating with students who have gone through some of the programs at the social innovation practice area at the Wond'ry. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna jump right in and give you an overview about what we're doing. And before I do that, I also wanna say there's someone else in the room with us, Jenny Randall, who is the Social Innovation Fellow at the Wond'ry, and she is instrumental in bringing this programming to life as well. And she'll be in the seminar breakout session around social innovation later this afternoon, so you'll get to meet her then. So Jenny, thanks for helping us put this together. Your voice is absolutely a part of this. So to begin, to give you an overview of social innovation at the Wond'ry, we have a series of programs which I'll talk about in a moment, but we have a number of learning outcomes that we pursue with our students and with the Vanderbilt community through our programs that we offer. So one of my core inspirations and motivations and the opportunities that we offer is to really help students understand the complexity of social and environmental challenges. So I remember when I was an undergraduate, I was really passionate about food justice. And I thought, oh, it seems really easy to just get people to be able to spend their WIC and SNAP dollars at a local farmer's market. Well, that was way back when that was just becoming possible. And I had an experience where I was in a service learning class and I worked with a community organization that was trying to do this work of making farmers markets more accessible to people who are on lower budgets. And I discovered, wow, this is really more complicated than I ever imagined. So from that experience, when I started working at the Wond'ry, I really decided social innovation at the Wond'ry should help students understand the complexity of affecting social and environmental change. There's lots of moving parts, lots of stakeholders at the table, and this work takes a long time. So that's a core part of our mission. We also train students to apply different problem-solving approaches that they can use to develop meaningful opportunities for impact in communities locally, in their hometowns, or potentially even abroad. Kevin Galloway, a little bit ago, mentioned that he runs design as an immersive Vanderbilt experience where Vanderbilt students are engaged in human-centered design work. At the Wond'ry and the social innovation practice area, human-centered design is one of the problem-solving approaches that we teach students to use through the social venture think tank, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. We also train students in systems thinking, which I'll talk about when I talk about Malthus System. So human-centered design and system thinking are the two approaches that we really dig into in social innovation practice area because we believe in the value that they bring for helping students understand and identify complexity, but then understand how to work through and with it to achieve meaningful impact. We also really try to encourage students to identify how their own unique knowledge and skills might contribute to social innovation. So all of us have our own personal, professional, academic experiences and knowledges that we bring to the table with us. We have our own unique inspirations and motivations for wanting to act. So in my interactions day to day with students, I really try to encourage them to think about what is it that you care about and why? What particular skills do you have that you can use towards making a meaningful impact here on campus or outside in the broader community? The last big key learning outcome that we have, and this is not exhaustive, but this is a quick overview, is we really strive to get students to understand the ethical considerations that you need to think about when you are trying to engage in community-based social and environmental impact work. So this picture here on this slide is a workshop that we had earlier this spring in the Social Venture Think Tank, where we brought in a local, really fiery, awesome community organizer and urban developer named Brittany Campagna. And she really pushed these students to think about, how do you engage in community outreach? How do you build a project that is relevant to the needs and interests of different communities? How do you create shared vision and shared value through building trust and building relationships with people who might have completely different experiences from you in their lives? This was a really, I think, challenging but exciting and meaningful workshop for students. And this is something that we strive to do each semester, is really get students to think about what is their positionality and what assumptions do they carry into the work that they're trying to do in communities. And then from that, how do we actually build mutual understandings and relationships of trust with people we've maybe never met before. So social innovation at the Wond'ry, we have 2 core programs that are up and running, sprinting ahead. And then we have 2 that are just emerging. I'll spend the most time talking about the 2 that are up and running, and then I'll talk a little bit about the 2 that are potentially on the horizon or entering our horizon. So the first program that we have is Malthus System, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. The Social Venture Think Tank, which is a program that's funded by the VentureWell Foundation. This summer, we're piloting the Social Innovation Apprenticeship. And then Jenny and I just finished a partnership proposal with the Robert Penn Warren Center for the Humanities to launch some coffee programming next year, during the next academic year, with a part of that being a pilot for a coffee equity lab at the Wond'ry. And again, I'll touch on this in a little bit, but also we'll be around this afternoon in the breakout session to talk more about all of these programs if you have questions after this. So to start us off in terms of our program overview, I wanted to talk a little bit about Malthus System. So we started Malthus System this year at the Wond'ry. Malthus System is a global competition that is hosted and coordinated by the University of Oxford in England and their Scholl Center for Social Entrepreneurship. And Malthus System challenges students to think differently about how social and environmental change happens. The competition and the program was motivated by the desire to get students to think about how difficult it is to actually identify solutions that can really get at the root causes of a problem. So often we see social and environmental challenges like affordable housing inaccessibility, or food deserts around Nashville as these challenges that persist for years and years and years. And part of the reason why that happens, as many of us in this room know, is that because there's many stakeholders involved. There's many underlying social, economic, environmental, political circumstances that are causing these challenges. So Malthus System really trains and challenges students to understand all of those root causes of a particular issue that they're interested in, and then identify opportunities to potentially transform that system so that the issue will be addressed through a concerted systematic effort. To do this research, students are trained in systems thinking approaches to problem solving. So systems thinking is the idea that all different kinds of circumstances, phenomena, social and environmental challenges, cultural practices have many different forces at play in causing them. So it's not just a social issue is never just a social issue. There are political things happening. There are economic things happening, environmental things, cultural things, mental modes that are affecting a problem. So systems thinking really helps students to back up, take a bird's eye view, and start to understand all these different pieces of the puzzle. This year in our inaugural competition, we were an institutional partner with the University of Oxford. We ended up having an on-campus virtual competition pretty soon after we went remote. And we had 7 teams compete, 21 students participated, and we had 6 judges from around the community who are Nashville-based change makers, if you will, evaluate all the teams on their comprehensive understanding of the problem that they chose. And they were evaluated using the rubric that is used in the global competition. And from that event, we crowned one winner of the Vanderbilt competition, although all the teams were winners in many ways. And that winner is Zahara Yusuf, who recently completed her master's degree at Vanderbilt. In her program, her project looked at economic opportunities that are available or not to new refugees in the Nashville community. So on June 15th to 17th, Zahara will be representing Vanderbilt at the global finals that will be hosted virtually by the University of Oxford. And she'll be one of 28 teams from around the world competing to be the global winner of the Malthus System competition. So to make Malthus System successful this year, we did some recruiting on campus to try to attract any student who is interested in, first of all, social and environmental change, and second of all, potentially winning a trip to England. One of the carrots that is dangled in front of students is that if you are the global finalist, you get to go to Oxford. Obviously this year with the pandemic, that was not a possibility, but Zahara will still get to go virtually and is thrilled about that. Another part of our success was that we had two faculty partnerships. Alex Sargent, who is the director of the costume shop at Vanderbilt and a senior lecturer of theater, integrated Malthus System into her first year writing seminar on fashion sustainability. So her students did a series of Malthus System projects looking at social, economic, and environmental challenges associated with the fast fashion industry. So labor rights, pollution, things of that nature. Another faculty member who we're going to hear from in just a moment is Laurie Troxel, who is the professor of practice in civil and environmental engineering. She integrated Malthus System into her sustainable development course this year. And she is actually going to join us now for a mini interview about her experience with Malthus System and integrating it into her course. So Laurie, can you get ready to unmute yourself and join me in a brief conversation?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, it's nice to see you. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us for a few minutes. We have about 5 to 7 minutes to chat about your experience with Malthus System. So I'll just jump right in, and I wanted to ask you if you could give us a little bit of background and an overview about the Malthus System projects that your class worked on this semester and what was the motivation?
Yeah, sure. So this course has been using the DIVE program for its projects for the past couple of years. And I love using design thinking in the course. But I noticed that I did not prepare the students well enough with research before they started their DIVE projects. And when I saw the Malthus System program, I thought this is a perfect way to prepare students for a design thinking challenge. And so our project this year was working with the Vanderbilt Future VU and designing a way to help faculty use a more sustainable method of getting to work, whether it's transit or biking or walking, and not use single-use occupancy vehicles. So our system that we looked at was bigger than that. We looked at the Nashville transportation system and what things you know, help people to use transit, what things keep people from using transit. And what I loved about it was that it was not, the Malthus System doesn't allow you to think this is just a linear problem. Here's the problem, here's a solution. And so the students are forced to really think in systems instead of just as a linear problem.
Yeah, that's great. And just to give you all, just to mention it, this map that's on the screen right now is a system map that came out of one of the projects from Laurie's class. This project actually was the second place in our global finals. So her teams did really well and were a big part of our success this year. So Could you talk a little bit about what was the biggest surprise or takeaway that you think your students had from using a systems approach to understand public transit or transit equity in Nashville?
Yeah, so I think I was surprised at how difficult it was at the beginning, that students did some research. I love that they start out, it's not just academic journals, but we look at academic journals and current events, videos, interviews, all kinds of different research. And then the first time they sat down to make maps, they were really frustrated, and then they just kind of drew one circle and made it really simple. And then over time, they let that frustration sink in. We're like, don't move away from that frustration so quickly. This is very complex. And so it was really great when they were finally able to take all of that information and draw it into a map that wasn't just one single circle, but there were feedback loops, and that all these different things impacted things, some positively and some negatively. So I was just really pleased that when they got past that frustration and were able to draw these maps. And then also, then they could use that to design. They're much better prepared for the dive project once they finally got to that.
Yeah, so could you talk a little bit about some of the dive projects that came out of their systems thinking research?
I wasn't, let's see, I'm trying to remember that. I was
I
thinking,
know it was a surprise question.
and also we were online at that point. So the dive projects didn't work out quite as well, but one really cool thing in the dive projects was that, they had to come up with prototypes and then test on people. And so they were supposed to be talking to Vanderbilt staff and faculty about this, but instead they shifted to, they came up with a solution for maybe their city or for Nashville, and they tested on their friends that are in their apartment or their family. And they were still able to achieve the academic learning goals through that. So even though we went online, I saw that this system, that everything could work online as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So I think that another value of Malthus System is that there's also an opportunity for students to actually talk to experts who are working around a particular challenge. So I think that your class got to get out in Nashville a little bit and talk to some people. Can you talk a little bit about the value of them interacting with people who were working on transit equity in our city?
Yes, thanks. That was a fantastic part of the research. We went to Farm Burger on Charlotte Avenue so they could see one of the places where the lack of transit was harmful. And then we had a speaker from TSU, David Paget, who spoke to them then about what it was like to use transit there, and the food desert, and how the transit system partnered with the food desert had such an impact on that community. We also went down to the WeGo station downtown, our Nashville Bus System's main hub, and the head of the Nashville MTA spoke to the students. We also had some, let's see, trying to think of else. We had someone who did life cycle analysis of the Nashville biosolid system, so that helped students to do life cycle analysis of their project. So getting out in the community did have a big impact on their projects.
Yeah, and that was evident in the reports that they wrote. Multiple people mentioned folks that they had talked to that were working in this arena in Nashville, and I think that's what made some of their projects so rich and impactful. So the last question I have for you is, why might you encourage other students or faculty to get involved with Malthus System? I know that you're considering integrating it into your course again next year. So what is it why would you recommend it?
Yeah, I think what it does is it gives you a path, gives faculty a path for helping students make sense of complicated systems and wicked problems. So in the past, I would try to communicate that to students, but still they went to a linear problem solving. They only saw it as linear, and so this, just sticking with it for over several weeks and having to draw a map really forced them to think of this as a system, and that it was not simple to solve, but it also helped them to see, you start with one area of the system and see how you can make a difference there. I don't think we mentioned the gaps analysis, but you also look at where are the gaps in research or where are the gaps in solutions, and try and find solutions there instead of trying to do a solution that's already in place.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Laurie. Thank you so much for joining us for a couple of minutes and for being a part of our success this year. And I look forward to working with you again in the future.
Thank you, Haynes. You were a big part of the success.
Thanks. So to move on, I have about 10 minutes left, I believe. I am going to turn to look now at the Social Venture Think Tank. So the Social Venture Think Tank is the second core program that we run at the Wond'ry. So the Social Venture Think Tank, as I mentioned, is funded by the VentureWell Foundation. We have partnerships each semester with 2 to 3 Nashville-based nonprofits, public offices, or social enterprises who are working in a particular impact area. And teams of students, which teams typically have 4 or 5 students, work with their partner using human-centered design to identify a new capability or tool that will help them advance their mission in a particular area. Typically, these tools and capabilities have some sort of technological component because that's required by our grant. But teams are interdisciplinary and they really dig into identifying opportunities to improve the work that these organizations are doing. For example, this picture was one project from the fall 2019 semester where a team worked with the Oasis Center in Nashville to help them improve their data management process and thus their impact tracking for their different program areas. So to give you a little bit more real world context for how the Social Venture Think Tank works and highlight a project that we did this semester. Well, actually I'm jumping ahead. So a quick look at the partners that we have for 2019-2020. We had 5. We had Poverty in the Arts, the Nashville International Center for Empowerment, NICE, the Oasis Center, the Family Center of Tennessee, and this logo, this 5th logo is who we're going to talk to now. A project that didn't have a name when we first started, but has come to be called Nashville Material Upcycle or Nashville Build Reuse. We're still trying to land on the specific name, but our partner was Keith Loiseau, who's the former Vanderbilt University architect, and he's here to join us to talk a little bit about his experience working with the Social Venture Think Tank in both the fall and spring semesters of this past year. So Keith, are you on the call?
I am.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Doing good, although my hair is shorter in this picture than it is now.
You got that pandemic hair.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. So would you give us a little bit of an overview about the project that you worked on with the Social Venture Think Tank?
Yeah, so it really has to do with material reuse and recycling. You know, roughly 50% of our carbon footprint comes from the built environment. And a lot of that is the extraction, the manufacture, the transportation, putting in place materials and buildings. And then they serve a life cycle, and at end of life, there's also a greater carbon footprint to then demolish a building, take it to the landfill. And so the effort to try to address that really is finding ways to reuse materials or to reuse buildings, or even better. So to advocate for renovation versus tearing down and rebuilding. And so some buildings are actually carbon neutral because they use materials that sequester carbon. You know, any kind of a wood or fiber that's grown, you know, contains carbon, and when you put it in a building, it locks it up and sequesters it. So that's kind of one of the main driving functions behind this is the environmental impact. But expanding this with the social ventures group and looking at that, there's certainly opportunities in reaching out to communities to build collaborations and relationships. benefit areas that maybe aren't seeing the type of growth and prosperity of other parts of Nashville. So that's really kind of what this group was diving into is some of those details.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about some of the deliverables or outcomes that the team was able to put together for you and our growing network of partners that you'll be able to use in the future as you get this thing off the ground?
Yeah, so this is actually the second semester of two groups of students that worked on this project, and I've been really impressed with the work that they've done in developing a business plan. It's actually quite detailed, looking at a philosophy of how would you go about launching a venture like this, even diving into what other organizations have done in cities across the country, what's worked well, what hasn't worked well, looking at their kind of their budgets and their evolution over time. So the students have actually developed a plan that's a phased approach that includes kind of resources that are needed to launch, and also looking at that cash flow projections, staffing, what would have to come up. So they've really built a foundation that is going to help this come about. And through the presentations, we've engaged with the larger Nashville community, leaders in government, leaders in architectural design, engineering design, contractors, demolition contractors. And so we have this whole network of people that are extremely excited about the development and the work that the students have done. And so we're projecting this to continue on to become a reality.
Yeah, and really quick, can you share a little bit about what your vision is for the next 12 to 18 months? Where do you see this project moving?
So, this project started early on, and part of my motivations in working with it has to do with the idea of furthering living buildings in Nashville. And living buildings, for people that don't know, so we all know about LEED certified buildings, and they're buildings that reduce their impact on the environment. In other words, they do less bad. But living buildings is actually a regenerative architecture that does good. So in other words, they harvest and generate more energy than they use. They meet all their water needs from water that falls on the site. And then this is a way to further the development of living buildings. So I see future steps being the actual launch of this facility. I think it's going to be tricky. And how do we do that in this environment, the COVID environment? We had a meeting just, was it yesterday or the day before, where the students are already thinking, there's a group of students working on this summer about what can we do to move this along and launch it. So I think that's next steps. And also I think next steps is actually finding an actual project. So we've started looking at a living building that would serve a local community of farmers. And it's a tiny little 1,000 square foot building, but we want to do this whole living building out of reused materials. And so going through that exercise of working with the community, sourcing the actual materials that it takes to make a living building, and even moving into the actual design and construction of it is going to be very exciting.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Keith. And just for the sake of time, I have to bid you farewell for the time being, but thank you for being a social venture think tank partner, and we really look forward to seeing how this project blossoms in the coming months and years.
Yeah, I will say that, Haynes, you've done a wonderful job leading the group, and the students have just exceeded all expectations.
Well, thank you. Well, partners make it more possible for me to do that work, so I appreciate that. And really quickly, I only have about 1.5 minutes left. I wanted to give a quick overview of 2 new programs that are coming to the Wond'ry. As Keith mentioned, we had a meeting a couple of days ago with 3 students from his team that are interested in continuing to work on their project this summer. So Jenny and I have been working to pilot a program called the Social Innovation Apprenticeship. And this project, we're piloting it this summer with 4 students. And it gives students the opportunity to continue working on a social or environmental impact project that they may have started in another course or co-curricular activity through a more individualized, intentional effort. So over the course of a semester, over the course of a summer, a student will continue their relationship with a community partner and really try to deeply understand, even further than they were able to in their courses, what's happening, what's causing the particular problem or the opportunity, how can we address it? And then students will also work to design a particular project that will actually make an even more meaningful contribution to the community or their partner organization. If anyone is interested in learning more about this, please join us this afternoon and we can talk more about it. And then the last thing in my last 30 seconds is we are in the process of putting together a pilot for a coffee equity lab. I have a side hustle in the coffee sector on sustainability, but the idea for this lab is that it will be a place where Vanderbilt students, faculty, and staff will come together with coffee industry stakeholders to engage in collaborative research, dialogue, and problem solving in pursuit of a more equitable value distribution in the value stream, both locally and globally. So getting at living wages, coffee pricing for producers and things of this nature, with a focus on interdisciplinary training and social entrepreneurship, sustainability, and social and environmental justice for students. Really thrilled about this. I could talk about this a long time, but for the sake of everyone and staying on a time track, I'm going to bid you all farewell, and I hope to see you this afternoon in the Social Innovations breakout session.